This week's episode of I Was a Teenage Film Snob is not brought to you by explosive relationships or radioactive monsters. Welcome to I Was a Teenage Film Snob. I'm James Chalmers, your friendly neighborhood film snob. And this is week 2 or episode 2 of the new year. Pardon me if I sound a bit quiet or a little gravelly. It took me an hour and a half to get my daughter to sleep this evening, and I've been talking all week, so I don't sound my usual chirpy, chippy self, but we're going to give it a hell of a go anyway. And it's a solo show this week, so if you were hoping to hear from a guest, apologies, it is just me, but I will be talking about a few movies. So, as you will know from previous episodes, when it's just me, I try not to let them go too long because who wants to sit there listening to a guy talk to himself in a room for more than half an hour? But I thought I'd do a couple of reviews, talk about some movies I've seen in the cinemas. I've been to the cinema 3 times since the start of the year, which is really nice. I think I've already watched 15 or 16 movies for the year as well. So I thought I'd just talk about a couple of flicks I've seen recently. And that would be this week's episode. Tina is going to come on soon to talk about her top 5 favorite films of 2023. But we just have to get a scheduling thing. It sounds weird to say I have to schedule it with my wife, but I went to the movies last night. She's got a party tonight, and when tonight is the night before the episode drops. So we haven't had a chance to get together and talk about those. And then Nick Owen will also come on, and he and I will do our lists of 2023 together. I still haven't figured out what my top 10 favorite films or top 5 favorite films of the year are because there's so many. And there's a couple left I'd still like to watch. But I have caught up on most of them. I think the only ones left I want to watch, to my best of my knowledge, are Mission Impossible 7. If I can go and see that, I'd like to watch that one still. I'd still like to see The Creator, and I'd still like to see Past Lives, which we talked about last week with Liz and David. And Poor Things. Poor Things is a 2023 film, but it doesn't release in Australian theatres until next week. So I'm hoping to catch that next week. And then by then I should have seen most of the 2023 films that I want to see. And then I'll be able to do my list. And as you know, I like to do my list with Nick Owen because we get a lot of chit-chat out of that. But anyway, that's the plan for the coming weeks. And then once we get through January, we'll start looking at everyone's favourite movies from the 2000s and some other stuff as well. All right, well, that was a very long-winded intro just to clear up some admin. So this week, as I mentioned, I'm going to do a couple of reviews. I did this a little while ago. I think the last one I did was on The Flash, if I remember correctly, or maybe there was another one since then. I can't remember exactly what it was. But I've been to movies a few times this year. I kind of touched on Wonka in last week's episode, so I won't talk about that one too much. But I have been to see 2 movies since I recorded that one. The first movie I saw was the Boxing Day rom-com Anyone But You, starring Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney. So I'll talk a little bit about that one. And then last night, I finally got to see Godzilla -1, which was one that was really... -1? -0. I can't remember what it's called now. I think it's called Godzilla -1. Let me look it up. What an amateur, right? Yeah, -1. I don't know why I was calling it -0. Don't mind me. It's been a very long week. So I saw that last night by myself in Gold Class, which is always strange, going to Gold Class theatre all by yourself. But I had a lot of fun with that one as well. So I'll talk about those 2 flicks, do a bit of a synopsis. We'll probably go into a little bit of spoiler territory, and then we'll get out of here for the week. So probably a shorter episode, but better a short episode than no episode at all. And I can talk about some movies in a bit more depth, which is what we do here. So I'll start with Anyone But You. This is a flick that wasn't really on my radar until maybe a month or so ago. I can't remember what I was saying, but I went to the movies to see something and the trailer for it came up, and I really dug the trailer. As I've talked about on the show time and time again, I'm not really a rom-com guy. It's never really been my genre. As I get older, I find more and more flicks from the genre I tend to like. But in general, it's not really my go-to. I'm just taking a drink, don't mind me. But I really dug the trailer. I thought it was funny. I like Glenn Powell. I've seen him in stuff before. The one that stands out to me is Scream Queens, where he played Chad Radwell, which I always thought was a fun character name. I'm sure I've seen him in other stuff as well. In fact, I know I have. I just can't remember off the top of my head. Maybe he was in Top Gun Maverick or something. I can't remember. Sydney Sweeney, I've seen her in nothing before. I'd heard of her. She kind of only came on my radar last year, probably towards the end of the year, but before that trailer. Um, I know she's in the show Euphoria, but I've never seen her in anything before. But from that trailer, I thought it looked fun. I thought they had some great chemistry. I liked the premise, the idea of pretending to be in a relationship just to make everyone happy over a wedding weekend. I thought that was a good setup for some fun. So I made the trek to go check it out by myself, and had a lot of fun with it. You know, so for those who aren't aware, basically, um, Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney kind of play these characters that have a one night stand, or it's not even really a one night stand. They kind of have this meet cute in a coffee shop, and then they spend the whole day together. And they spend the night together, and then through misunderstanding, they never see each other again. So, again, spoilers for a flick that's been out for about 3 weeks now. Basically, she leaves early because she's afraid of commitment. She hasn't been in a relationship in a while, and he thinks that she's kind of walked out on him. And then when she walks back she's changed so much. Like, oh, I'll go back and we'll have breakfast and stuff. She overhears him kind of talking about how she meant nothing to him. So that's the premise, and both of them were kind of doing these out of insecurities. We find later, like he didn't actually feel that way, but he he didn't want his friends to know that he felt something, so he just kind of acted all macho about it. So to fast forward 2 years later, and they meet again in a bar, and it turns out that his best friend is marrying her sister, and now they have to spend like a week together in Australia. So they both have to share the same flight internationally, head to Australia, and then be in the wedding party together. And so everyone in the wedding party that's not them kind of hatches this scheme to try and make them fall in love. But Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell, they kind of catch on to it pretty quickly. So they decide, look, let's play into it. Let's pretend we're in love, because then that at least will shut everyone up, and also means we can try and get through this wedding week in peace, and we won't ruin the wedding for my sister and your best friend, that sort of thing. So pretty fun premise. I'm sure they've done something like this before, but I hadn't seen anything quite like this. And then hilarity ensues. The flick also stars some really great actors and actresses. Alexandra Shipp plays Glenn Powell's buddy, the girl who's getting married. I can't remember who plays Sydney Sweeney's sister, but she was really good as well. You've got a couple of Australian legends in there. Brian Brown from FX fame and kind of hard-nosed 70s and 80s action films plays the father of one of the brides, and he kind of plays a real like larrikin kind of character, a bit of a he's his heart's in the right place, but he's not quite switched on. And then I can't remember the name of the woman who plays his wife. And then you've got on the other side of the family, Sydney Sweeney's family. Dermot Mulroney plays her dad and her sister's dad, obviously. And then Rachel Griffiths, Australian actress, by the way. Rachel Griffiths plays an American mum, and then the Australian guy has an American wife. It was a bit of a weird choice. I don't know why they didn't just put the Australians together. I don't know. It didn't bother me. I just thought it was a bit unusual. And then there are a bunch of other cast members who I'd never seen anything before. But remember, I'm a little bit older. I'm not paying attention to young Hollywood. I mean, if I kind of see a few people in a few performances, I'll start to learn their names. But I didn't know anyone in this film. But that's okay. So as far as the comedy goes, I thought it was fine. And that's certainly not a criticism. Like I thought there were some really good jokes in there. But also, what impressed me more and what I wasn't expecting was the love story. Most rom-coms I find tend to be very cheesy, very forced, very kind of like saccharine and over the top. And I also find them to be very safe, and safe can often lead to boring. But I didn't find that with this film. I really bought the love story. You could tell there was this kind of underlying desire between the two characters, and they wanted to be together, but through their own frustrations and stubbornness and circumstances, they refusing themselves happiness. And it does have big cheesy moments. Like the end of the film, it is a big romantic gesture, the way that he kind of like asked to be with her and stuff like that. Spoiler alert. But all through the flick, I thought that like the love story was handled quite well. Like lots of really well shot kind of longing looks and kind of missed glances and stuff like that. But it never felt cheesy. It never felt forced. It felt I don't want to go so far as to say it was grounded and realistic, but it did feel like it did have a hint of realism to it. It felt personal. It felt like there was some stakes there. The other thing that really impressed me with this is that it wasn't afraid to get a little bit raunchy. And by that, I don't mean it was like an absolute like sex fest or anything like that. But most rom coms play it really safe when the two characters do end up getting together. Um, it's often like you there'll be a shot of them like running to the bedroom, and then like a fade out, and then like suddenly cuts to the next morning, and like they're like, oh, good morning, like, and then suddenly like they've been together, but we didn't witness it. This like goes there, and again, it's not explicit, it's not out of control, like it's not like hardcore nudity, but they do really lean into like, yeah, there has been underlying desire, and we're going to show you that desire, and you kind of see them really kind of be into each other. And I don't mean that like physically. I just mean like you get to see them like now that the kind of the floodgates have opened. Now that they're like, you know what, I do want to be with you. They just kind of give in to that kind of temptation, that desire to be with each other, which I thought was really refreshing for a rom com, because most rom coms play it very, very safe, and they weren't afraid to do it. Um, so yeah, look, I don't probably have too much more to say about Anyone But You. Um, I only saw a couple of comedies last year. The other kind of adult comedy was No Hard Feelings. Um, and I'd probably put them both on about the same level in terms of entertainment value. I think the love story in Anyone But You is stronger, but I would say the comedy in No Hard Feelings is stronger there. So they'd be a good double feature together. Actually, I think they're both really enjoyable. The cast was really good. Sydney Sweeney, as I haven't really seen her in too much, she's got this real bombshell thing going on. Like I could easily see her as like the woman in heels in a hard nosed detective comic, yeah, detective movie, or like she's got a bit of a Marilyn Monroe thing going on, and people might be like rolling their eyes at me or wondering why I say that, but like, it's just she's got like a slightly huskier voice, like it's a slightly deeper voice. She's got like these big, like heavy lidded eyes. The way she carries herself, obviously, I don't need like everyone who's seen anything with Sydney Sweeney knows what she looks like. Like she's gorgeous, obviously, but I'm really digging this kind of bombshell vibe she's bringing. Like it reminds me of old Hollywood quite a bit. So I really hope that as she continues to progress in her career, they really lean into that and give her some of those kind of cooler roles. Um, but yeah, I thought it was really charming. I thought it was really sweet. Um, as I said, not the funniest rom com, but I didn't mind that. I didn't need it to be like joke after joke of gross out humor. I just wanted like a good story, and I really loved the romance angle of it. I really enjoyed that, which is something I never thought I'd say. Um, but yeah, I thought it was a really strong rom com, and a lot of fun as well. Like a lot of people take cinema really seriously. I'm guilty of doing that in the past myself, but I think this is a good popcorn flick. It's a good date flick. It's really cute, and I think there's enough in there for everyone. So. Also, being that set in Australia, they hit that stereotype that Australians swear a lot. Some excellent uses of cursing, as you know, I do like some good cursing in a film, and I think there really are a couple of really good lines in there for some pretty heavy cursing. But yeah, so Anyone But You, I would totally recommend. If you're unsure or on the fence about it, wait till it comes to streaming or physical, but check it out because it's good fun. Alrighty, let's talk about the next flick I saw. I saw last night Godzilla minus one. I didn't know what to expect. I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to Godzilla, specifically the Japanese iterations. I've only seen one other Japanese Godzilla film, and it's Shin Godzilla from 2016. Previously, I've seen just about every American Godzilla. I've seen the 97 one with Jeff Goldblum. I saw it when I was a lot younger, not when it came out in theaters, but probably when I was in my teens. I remember enjoying it then. Um, I haven't gone back to it, but I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's entertaining enough. I've seen the Gareth Evans 2014 one, which I quite liked. It was my first kind of real introduction to Godzilla. That was probably a lot closer to what the Japanese version of Godzilla is. I know a lot of people disagree, but I thought that was a lot better. Probably the best. I think that one film in particular is the best American version of Godzilla we've seen ever. Um, one thing I didn't love was the human drama element. I've talked about this on the show before. One thing that I find these American remakes of Godzilla films, one of the biggest problems is they focus so much on the human drama, but again, like especially on children, it's a really weird choice. And because of that, I like the visuals of it quite a bit. I liked the Godzilla stuff, but I did find some of it just a little bit slow. Um, whilst not a Godzilla film, I will obviously touch on Kong Skull Island, which I think is the best of the American kind of classic monster movies. So when they've taken previous properties and remade them, I think Skull Island is one of the strongest entries. It's really fun. It's a great idea to make it a period piece, but also gets quite dark and shows the kind of the hidden dark nature of humanity, which I really liked. Plus, John C. Riley's excellent in that. Godzilla 2, King of the Monsters, I think that's what it's called. I thought it was fine. I watched that one during the pandemic. I thought it was okay. I don't have much more to say on that one. And then Godzilla vs Kong, I thought it had some really wonderful set pieces, but all in all, it didn't quite hit the mark for me. So I really liked that whole fight in the ocean when like King Kong's on top of a boat fighting Godzilla. I really liked seeing Kong pick up like an ancient axe from the center of the earth. I really liked seeing Kong and Godzilla fight Mechagodzilla. I thought that was all very, very cool. Um, but again, like the biggest flaw for those American Godzilla films is the human story. It's not that I don't want a human story. I thought I didn't until I saw Godzilla Minus Zero. I just feel like they're focusing on the wrong things. They're trying to, I think, ground too much or put too much meaning into it by getting like ancient um, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like ancient organizations involved, like organizations dedicated to researching monsters. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. Godzilla Minus One is amazing. It's incredible. It's a really, really great flick. As I said, I didn't know what to expect going in. I haven't seen any trailers. Just the word of mouth and the reviews online were enough to get me going there. So I had to go looking because it's not playing mainstream in Australia. I had to go looking, and thankfully there was a cinema about a 30-minute drive from my house, and they're showing it like limited sessions. And so I had to go gold class. Gold class is our premiere. It's the most expensive way to watch a movie in Australia, just about. But thankfully, I had some vouchers. So I went there, and then I found out that their air conditioners weren't working in the middle of summer. But by the time I got in there, they were all fixed, so that was okay. So Godzilla Minus One is kind of a reboot or a remake of the franchise. It seems like they're trying to start again from scratch. Um, and what they did with this film, which I thought was really clever, was they've made it a period piece as well. So they've set it in 1945 through to 1948, I want to say. Um, and the film opens at the end of World War II. So without getting too much into history, although it's hard not to with this film, um, Japan suffered obviously huge losses in World War II with the bombing of Hiroshima, all the nuclear weapons testing. And in fact, Godzilla, for those who don't know, the creation of the story Godzilla was in direct response to all the nuclear weapons testing. And in fact, in the original Godzilla, he was meant to be like the product of all that testing and then kind of took his toll or took his revenge on humanity for creating him and, kind of imbuing him with radiation. This film doesn't quite go down that path, but I always thought that was really interesting. And that's something that I think that the American remakes have really missed the point of, which is just like, he's just a cool monster that storms through the city. It's like, he is, but there's more to it. So I'm probably going to be a lot more spoilery with this one than with Anyone But You. That one there, I don't think anyone's too worried about spoilers, but Godzilla, I think I will just remind you, I'm going to spoil it a little bit. So the flick opens with our main character. I think his name is Koichi, and he is a kamikaze pilot for the World War II Japanese troops. And he's flying on his way to a mission, and then he ends up touching down this island called Odo, I want to say. And when he goes down to this island is filled with repairmen and people who kind of fix planes. And he's basically like, my plane isn't working. I can't complete my kamikaze mission. I need, because the plane won't work. Now, this turns out to be a lie. He's just afraid of dying, which is fair enough. And he doesn't want to complete a kamikaze mission. And then, like, the technicians do figure out, like, oh, like, there's nothing wrong with your plane. And then this one guy kind of comes over to him and says, like, look, I get it. The war's over. Why would you go and kind of kill yourself for no reason? Like, we need people to live. And then that night, while they're on Odo, they hear a disturbance. And then, like, in the first 10 minutes, Godzilla is on screen. Like, it's dark, it's at night, and he's just stomping all over this island, biting people in half. And they're all like saying to Koichi, our main character, like, shoot him, like, get into your plane and shoot him. Like, the bullets in your plane will be enough to, like, hurt him. Not knowing the true ferocity of Godzilla. But Koichi, once again, is too scared to do anything, and because he doesn't do anything, all the soldiers die. Um, and this becomes a reoccurring theme in the film. Like the whole film is pretty much a redemption story, and the idea of him, having survived time and time again throughout the war when he shouldn't have, because he was meant to die first as a kamikaze pilot, then on the island with Godzilla, and then more and more things happen, and he's living with this guilt. Like, why should he survive? Due to cowardice when everyone else gave their lives to protect their country and things like that. So it is really dark. They lean into that a lot, and he does kind of have a bit of a death wish in the second half of the film because he feels that's the only way he can seek redemption, kind of atone for his mistakes earlier in the film. Um, but so in the opening 10 minutes, you get to see a Godzilla attack. Now, this flick was made for $15 million, which sounds like a lot to you and me, but for a big budget like monster film, it's nothing. Like in comparison, those American Godzilla films cost like $100 million minimum to begin with. So they do a lot with a little in this film. And some of the CGI isn't perfect. There are a few moments where like it does look a little bit cheesy and fake, but the flick is so well executed. The story is really grounded, and because of that, you don't care. You forgive it quite a bit. Um, so that's our opening scene. Koichi returns home to find his town has been bombed. All of his family is dead. All of his neighbors and friends are dead due to the bombing. And he meets this woman who's his neighbor, and she basically loses it with him because her children died in the bombings of Hiroshima. Yet he survived because he avoided his duty. So that's his neighbor. So she's reminding him of it all the time. This poor guy, like he just didn't want to die, and then he's reminded of it time and time again. Um, so then, as the flick continues, he meets this woman in like a marketplace, and like she's labeled a thief, and all these people, like these cops and stuff, are trying to like arrest her, and she thrusts like a bundle of something into his arms. He thinks it's what's been stolen, but it turns out to be a child, an infant. Um, and then he ends up reconnecting with the lady later, and he finds out that this woman has lost her family due to all the bombings as well, and the baby is not hers, but in fact, the baby lost her family as well due to the bombings. And so these three of them are these three kind of kindred people, like a baby, a woman, and a man who have no family, and decide to kind of live together to try and overcome, the kind of the post fallout of war, which was really interesting. Like again, after this, we don't see Godzilla for probably about half an hour, and I didn't care because I really cared about the story. And this is what I mean when I talk about like those American remakes. Like it's like they focus so much on like the scientific community doing research on Godzilla for the last 10 years and trying to find monsters and like test out their blood and stuff. It's like it's so ridiculous. Whereas this was just a very human story. It was a guy like you had these three characters, one of which who can't even talk for the first half of the film. This baby, but it's like these three characters: the baby that you hope survives, this woman who has taken on this honorable duty to raise a child that isn't hers, despite not having any money or anywhere to live, and this guy who's going through this tremendous survival guilt. Like it was such a stroke of genius. It's so simple, but it works so well. So after living together for a few days or a few weeks, Koichi decides he needs to get a job because whilst he can let them live in his house, he needs to be able to provide for them. So he goes looking for jobs, and he finds a job as a minesweeper. So for those who don't know, in World War II, after the war ended, um, I believe this happened not just with Japan but with America as well. They employed people as minesweepers, but who would basically go in boats and clear out all the sea mines that had been left in the ocean during the war. Um, and the woman, I can't remember her name now, who's living with Koichi is like, you can't do this, you can't go out there because you've just come back from war. I refuse to let you die. You can't take on this job, it's too dangerous. And he's like, don't worry about it, it's fine. We're using mine resistant boats. These boats can't be detected by mines. I'll be totally safe. They're mine proof. And there's a very quick cut to him at the docks, and it's this rickety old tugboat made of wood. It's the worst boat you've ever seen in your life. Um, but he's right. It is mine proof because these mines are all magnetic, and because he's sailing a boat full of wood, the mines won't be attracted to the boat. Um, and this begins what I would say is probably my favorite part of the film. The film kind of is divided into maybe three or four parts, and this is my favorite part. This is where we get introduced to a few new characters, um, and the film starts to resemble Jaws quite a bit. So Koichi jumps on this boat. There's this captain who's kind of like a tough guy, but also like has a bit of a like very much like a fatherly sense of humor, or like an uncle sense of humor, the one who makes fun of his friends, but it's all good natured ribbing. There's this scientist, And then like there's a teenage boy who wishes he was too young to enter the war, and he wishes he could have been there to help fight for his country. Um, and so Koichi becomes friends with these guys, and then we have these montages, and a good half an hour, I'd say, of them on the water, and it feels very much like Jaws, because they're just sitting there, they're shooting the breeze, having a chat, and having a laugh, blowing up mines, and then out of nowhere, Godzilla returns, and it's been I think at this stage it's been a year since Koichi first encountered Godzilla, um, and even Godzilla is shot like Jaws. You just see the spikes of his back like breaking the surface of the water. And these guys start trying to throw mines into his mouth and then shoot it, which is just like what they did with Bruce the Shark in Jaws. Um, so I'm sitting there, I'm like, this feels an awful lot like Jaws. But I was never disappointed or felt like it was a ripoff. I just thought it was a fun idea. Like, you've got Godzilla, he does live in the water. Like, that's where he lives, is in the water. So why not give him, you know, some great chase scenes and fight scenes in the water? And there's a lot of action. You get to see Godzilla like sinking much larger ships and like tearing them down and stuff like that. And thankfully, Koichi and his mates managed to make it back home safe, um, because they scare Godzilla off by exploding a mine in his mouth. And we learn now very early on in the film that Godzilla's skin is too thick to receive too much damage, but the tissue inside his mouth, inside of him, is a lot more susceptible to damage. So blowing up a mine in his mouth did considerable harm, and we come back to that later in the film. Um, Now I can't remember exactly what happens next, but throughout the flick between now and our Godzilla attack, basically we start, the rumor of Godzilla starting to build, and most people don't believe them because they just think they were crazy on a boat, and like drunk or seasick or too much sun, or they saw something that they thought looked like a sea monster, but it's nothing. Um, and then we get to our next big action set piece, which is Godzilla kind of storming Tokyo. Well, actually, it's not Tokyo. It's called Ginza, which is the island where Koichi and his friends live. And Koichi is at home with their adopted daughter, who's now a toddler, but the woman has gone into the city to go and to go to work, and then all the warnings are coming up, and like there's a sea monster coming out and it's attacking the land. And Koichi kind of runs the city to try and save his partner or his friend. There is kind of a love story there. They never really kind of address it early on, but like there's like an unrequited kind of unspoken thing between them. And so he's going into the city, he's trying to find her to get her out of the city because he knows how deadly Godzilla can be. There's a really great scene of like a newscaster and like his team on the roof of a building, literally like kind of reporting on Godzilla. Now it's not TV reporting because this is before TV, so it's all over the radio. But they're like on the building, and then Godzilla's knocking buildings down. They kind of fall off the building. And that's the end of them. Um, the other thing that I kind of haven't touched on, there's a lot of quiet moments, a lot of conversations, and there's one ongoing conversation is that Koichi, the war hasn't ended. The war's not over. Like, the war, there might not be fighting anymore between Germany and the US, and Japan aren't taking casualties from war anymore. But he's still living with the survivor's guilt. He's still living with the shame of not fulfilling his duty. So his war hasn't ended, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because it's going to come up again later. But anyways, he's trying to find the woman, and they finally run into each other just as Godzilla is about to level the city using his nuclear breath. And at the last second, she manages to push him in an alley, keeping him safe. But everyone else, including her, are blown away by this thing. And this was another of my favorite scenes because in action films, this is the part where you would get that very heroic action movie scream where someone's like, "No!" And it's very like very obviously done for the film. The scream that this actor gives when he realizes what's happened is so heartbreaking and guttural. It might be my favorite performance of the year. It's one shot, but just him screaming, like the desperation, the frustration, the sadness, knowing that he came to save her and she ended up sacrificing herself to keep him alive, is just another opportunity in his life where he should have died that he survived. Um, so after the Godzilla attack, his scientist friend is like, "Hey, I've heard that there's some citizens trying to get something together to try and stop this monster Godzilla because, you know, um, the government's not doing anything. The government's refusing to engage. America can't help us because if they kind of come towards Japan, the Soviets might think it's an act of war because there's tension between America and Russia. So we're on our own. So we're all going to get together and come up with a plan. And so Koichi's like, all right, well, I'll show up. And then there's this wonderful scene where it's like a town meeting, and none of them are government employees. They're all just regular citizens, but a lot of them are former naval officers or army officers, and they're trying to come up with this plan. And it turns out his scientist friend from the boat is actually the brains behind it all. He's come up with this idea where he's like, look, if we can kind of pinpoint Godzilla to a place in the ocean, we can get two boats to wrap around him with these tanks that will sink him and drag him underwater. And because the pressure is so intense and so quick, that should kill Godzilla. But if it doesn't, we've also got these inflatable devices attached within these canisters. So if once he gets down to the bottom water, we can hit the button. These flotation devices will open, and then we'll bring him up straight away as well. The pressure between going down like 1,500 to 2,000 feet and then coming back up again, that'd be more than enough to kill anything. And they're all like, this is a great plan. Some of them are a little bit skeptical because like he's a monster, nothing seems to work. But the scientist's whole thing is like, look, we need to find a way to fight this thing that doesn't cost the lives of Japanese. No more of our people can die. And the things we did in war were wrong. And he kind of addresses the whole idea of kamikaze parts. He's like, we created this role for our citizens where their life, they have to give their life for the betterment of our country, and that's not the way we should be. We need to be better than that. So let's come up with a plan that's not going to risk lives and it's going to keep people safe, whilst we still, take this monster down. At the same time, Koichi remembers that he was able to damage Godzilla by attacking him in the mouth, and he asks if there are any planes available. And they do have some planes left over from the war. They actually never got used. They were kind of prototypes, but they're all functional, but they need a mechanic. And then Koichi remembers the mechanic, the last surviving mechanic from the Isle of Odo, where everyone else died. And this guy hates him because obviously his cowardice led to the death of all his men. I think his name was Sachinawa, if I remember correctly. We'll say that it is. So it takes a little bit of investigating, it takes a little bit of time, but eventually Koichi manages to get Sachinawa down to Ginza, and Sachinawa like, beats the crap out of him, like just beats him up because he's so angry at him. But then Koichi's like, look, we have an opportunity to stop this monster. I have an opportunity to make things right. Here's what we want to do. Will you help me? And Sachinawa was basically like, look, I will help the people of Ginza, but I have nothing for you. And Koichi's like, good enough. So they get to work on this plane. In the meantime, like the citizens are, getting ready for this plan. They're getting their boats ready. They're getting like everything ready to stop Godzilla because they know he's going to come back again soon. And Koichi is, getting ready to die. Like he's preparing to die. He knows he's going to die, and so he starts organizing things. He kind of gets all this money together and puts it aside for his neighbor because whilst he hasn't told the neighbor yet, he's going to leave a letter to the neighbor saying, "Look, I need you to look after my my kind of surrogate daughter, like the woman who found her is dead. I'm going to be dead in 24 hours time. Someone needs to look after this toddler, so please look after her," which was really tough for me to watch as a parent. I talk a lot about it on the show about like when things affect me as a parent. Whenever that little girl came up, like my heart started to break because I just thought about myself being a father and the tough circumstances they were in, the tough decisions that they had to make. But then we get to the next day, and Koichi's, leaves the letter for the neighbor on the bed of the daughter. Doesn't say goodbye to the daughter. He leaves before she wakes up, and he heads to the airport. That's where the plane is. He's talking to Sachinawa, and the plane's all functional. They're showing him all the different bombs, and then there's a conversation which we don't get to hear, but Sachinawa and Koichi are talking privately. And this was the only thing that I thought was a little bit predictable for me, because once I saw them talking and I kind of saw him pointing around the plane, I knew what they were going to do with it. But that's okay. Like it's fine. Like it was still wonderful, and I don't mind that I predicted it because I'm glad they did this. So Koichi's getting ready to fly off. He starts flying this plane, and he finds Godzilla on land already, and they're like, we need to get him back to the ocean so we can do the plan. So he's kind of antagonizing and trying to lead him back to the ocean. Meanwhile, our original boat captain, our scientist, are in a ship, and they're getting ready to launch the big plan on Godzilla. So Godzilla comes back to the ocean. These two boats start doing the plan. They sink Godzilla. It works, or it looks like it works. They bring him back up, but then they find out they can't get him the whole way up because of his weight. So They're like, well, what do we do now? He's like 800 feet below. How are we going to get him out of the water? And then all these other tugboats and stuff show up. And the kid who wanted to be in the war from earlier has brought all these boats in. I'm skipping bits and pieces. So if you're like, this makes no sense, why would I do that? It's just me trying to remember it from like midnight last night. So they're able to get Godzilla back up. But what they find is that the plan hasn't worked. Godzilla's still alive. The pressure didn't work. So they're really not sure what to do. But then thankfully Koichi's flying his plane, and then they realize why he wanted to be in the plane to begin with. Because they're like, why would you need to fly a plane? You don't need to worry about flying a plane. Like, oh, it's good that you managed to get him back to the water, but we didn't need that. And then they can see like they figured out like, oh, he was a kamikaze pilot. He's going to give his life and try to kill Godzilla. So Koichi like is flying towards Godzilla, and Godzilla's powering up like his beam, like he's about to like level all these boats. So not only is Koichi about to give his life, he's also about to save all these people. So it's the complete opposite of the opening scene. Instead of him hiding, cowering while Godzilla kills everyone, he's about to be the only man standing between Godzilla and the rest of Japan, and he's going to save everyone and give his life. So he flies his plane. It's a really wonderful, like it's like top tier like action cinema. It's so good. So he flies his plane into Godzilla's mouth, and the bomb goes off, and they're all like, "Oh my goodness! Like Koichi sacrificed himself. Did it even work?" And like the dust starts to settle, and the first thing they notice is that Koichi is not dead, but in fact he's floating in an ejected seat. And then we see a little cut back to the conversation he had with Sachinawa, where Sachinawa was like, "Look, I've hated you for all these years for what you did, and I thought you were a disgrace. Like, you had no honor, and you refused to die when you should have, and you abandoned your duty." He goes, "But I feel differently now. You need to live. Like, we shouldn't trade lives. So I don't want you to die tomorrow. You've got a child, whether you choose to acknowledge that she's your child or not. You have a child you're responsible for. So we've built this thing called an ejector seat. If you press this button, it'll get you out in time so you can get out before the explosion goes off. Please use it." It's a really beautiful moment, like, because Koichi has now redeemed himself to Sachinawa, and Sachinawa has now forgiven Koichi. It's a really wonderful moment. So, and then we cut back and he's floating down, and the dust settles, and Godzilla, like, it's probably the most gory moment in the film. Godzilla's got like half a head, like his face has just been blown clean off. And so there's much celebrating. And then we see like Koichi and everyone get back to the ship dock. The ship docks up, and the neighbor's there with the daughter, and she's holding a letter. And again, pardon me, they showed this letter a little bit earlier, and when I saw that again, I kind of had an idea what it might be, but it didn't make sense it would be that, so I wasn't quite sure. But he reads it, and then he's like, "We have to go," and he picks up the girl, and carries her, and we cut to them, and they're in a hospital. They're running to the hospital, get to this room, and the woman is still alive. Don't know how. It's the only part of the film that doesn't really make sense. Like it makes no sense that she survived, and it is a bit silly. But in that moment, I was really happy because of everything that happened. I'm like, you know what? It doesn't need to make sense. I'm glad that he had a happy ending. And then the last line of the film, she says to him, she looks at him because he's like in disbelief, and the daughter's crying, and he's crying, and she goes, "Tell me, is your war finally over?" And it was such a lovely way to end the film. And when she said that line, I burst into tears. Like, just the whole, like, because this whole film is about guilt and sacrifice and redemption and the battles we face as human beings. And so, like, and she knew, even though he like didn't really talk about being a defector, he mentioned it once to her, and she never blamed him for it or judged him for it. She was like, "Look, you're a human being," but she knew kind of like the weight that it carried on him. So when they reunite finally, it's not even like, "Surprise, I'm alive," or, "You're a hero." She's like, "Please tell me, like, I just want this to be over for you, for your own sake." And it's so beautiful. Um, and then just before the credits roll, we cut to a shot underwater, and like Godzilla's head is sinking in the water. But because he's a mutant and he's made of radiation and he can heal fast, we start to see like some activity like from his body like regenerating, and then the classic 1950s Godzilla score kicks in, and then we're out. So that's the whole flick. I've obviously given you a bit of a rundown of what the flick looks like. I've gone into quite a bit of detail, so if you haven't seen it and you chose to listen to the whole thing, I have spoiled it for you, but I will say this: doesn't matter. The flick is brilliant. I haven't come up with my list for 2023, but I guarantee Godzilla's on there somewhere. I just thought it was so refreshing. Um, they did a really great job of balancing monster and human story, and I never felt like one outweighed the other. Like when Godzilla is on the screen, like he is there to be Godzilla. Um, when but most of it is the human story, and again, like I can't help but feel they've really molded it on the original Godzilla films, which I haven't seen, but it feels like a little bit of a callback to that. But also, it feels like a really big play on Jaws. Like, I feel like that's been heavily influenced the film as well. And maybe this is me connecting to flicks that I really like, but it felt very influenced by that as well. It's a masterpiece. It's a really well made flick. I don't want to oversell it because then people are like, "Oh, it wasn't that good." Um, but just a good, simple story executed well. All the performances are good. Some of the CGI is a bit dodgy, but like for a $15 million budget, I'll take it. Again, I have no problem with bad CGI or incomplete CGI. I've always been quite forgiving of that. But some of the most recent kind of complaints have been around a lot of the Marvel shows and movies. Um, that any Marvel film has like a minimum budget of $100 million, but the bigger ones start at $200 million. Like I think Thor 4, sorry, 4 or 5, 4. I think Thor 4 was like $150 million or something. Godzilla was 10% of that, and the CGI, is probably better than the best CGI. The worst CGI in Godzilla is probably better than the worst CGI in Thor. Again, not making comparisons. I like Thor: Love and Thunder quite a bit. Um, so there you go. Two flicks I've seen this year. I'm going to try and see Poor Things next week. I'm going to try and get my list finalized. Nick Owen, I believe, is still out of the country. So as soon as he's back in the country, we will get together, talk about our favorite movies, which I'm really looking forward to do. But I'll try and catch a few more 2023 releases before then so I can get my list as comprehensive as possible. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of the show. I hope you dug my little deep dive into these two movies. If you haven't seen Anyone But You, if you haven't seen Godzilla, go check them out. They're both really entertaining, both very different movies, obviously. If you felt that I was a little bit gravelly or a little bit, lower than my usual self, wasn't as, kind of upbeat or loud, as I mentioned before, I've just, it's been a very long week at work. I've been talking a lot in my role, so I'm a bit gravelly, and it was just a bit of a challenging evening. But I loved both of these movies. I can't wait to watch them again. And I can't wait to hear all your thoughts as well. So check them out and let me know on Instagram. You can head over to Instagram. I was a teenage film snob, underscores between every word. Send me a message, write a comment. I'll definitely respond to you. You can also write us a review. We've seen a couple of reviews come through on Spotify. Nothing written, but just some points allocated, and they've been very positive. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can head to tpublic.com and search for I Was a Teenage Film Snob, or you can check out my links on Instagram and you can get a t-shirt or sticker that way as well. It's 20% off for first-time customers. I don't really get any of the money. It's really just about promoting the show, and the t-shirts are great. They're designed by Josh, who's been on the show time and time again. Well, next week we'll talk more about some of the movies we love, and it'll be less of a review type thing. But until then, as I say every single week, guys, I was a teenage film snob, but I'm trying to be better. We'll see you next week.